The crimson light of Horus Prime's setting sun glinted off the polished edges of Captain Serena Cade's ceremonial armor as she stood at rigid attention before the Orion War Council. The chamber, a vast, circular space with high ceilings adorned with battle tapestries, seemed designed to make even the most decorated officers feel small. 50 years had passed since the Orion Planetary Alliance had joined the Galactic Federation, and in that time, they had maintained their proud military traditions with unwavering dedication. Captain Cade intoned High General Scalaris, his voice echoing through the chamber. Your intelligence division has brought us concerning news. Elaborate on this signal. Your research vessel detected. Serena stepped forward, her posture perfect, shoulders back, chin level, eyes focused on a point just above the council members' heads, as Orion military protocol demanded. 3 standard days ago, the Aurora, I detected an anomalous energy signature from the Eban Rift system, she reported. Initial analysis confirms technology patterns, inconsistent with any civilization cataloged in Federation databases. The signature contains what appear to be communication protocols of extraordinary complexity. Murmurs rippled through the assembled generals and admirals. Orion military doctrine was built on certainty, knowing your enemy, understanding their tactics, and defeating them through superior technique and discipline. Unknown variables were not merely inconvenient. They were offensive to the Orion worldview. General Scalaris stroked his silver-streaked beard, the metals on his chest catching the light as he shifted in his seat. And your recommendation, Captain? A military diplomatic expedition, sir. Small enough to avoid provocation, strong enough to defend itself if necessary. Serena maintained her stoic expression, though internally she felt the familiar flutter of anticipation. After years of routine intelligence operations, analyzing theoretical threats and conducting training simulations, the prospect of encountering something truly unknown stirred her curiosity. Very well, Scalaris declared after a moment of consideration. You will lead this expedition, Captain Cade. Your record in intelligence operations is exemplary. Take the Aurora the friend, and a complement of our finest combat specialists. Establish contact, assess capabilities, and report back. Remember, you represent not just Orion, but our place within the Galactic Federation. I understand my duty, General. Serena bowed her head slightly, precisely the angle prescribed for acknowledging a superior's command. See that you do, Scalaris replied. Orion has maintained peace through strength for 3 centuries. We have perfected the art of combat to its highest form. Whatever these beings may be, ensure they understand the consequences of hostility toward the Alliance. Later, as Serena made her way through the gleaming corridors of the Centurion space station, her second-in-command, Major Rian Torres, fell into step beside her. Congratulations on the assignment, Captain, he said, his voice low. First contact with a potentially hostile civilization, the kind of mission officers wait their entire careers for. Serena nodded curtly. It's an opportunity to demonstrate Orion combat excellence beyond simulations, certainly. Torres studied her face. They had served together for 7 years, and he had developed an uncanny ability to read beneath her carefully maintained professional mask. You seem reserved. Most would be exhilarated. She paused, glancing around to ensure they were alone in the corridor. The signal analysis contains irregularities. Ryan, pattern shifts that defy our prediction algorithms. Whatever we're dealing with, it doesn't think like us. Nothing thinks like Orion, Torres replied, with the confidence that permeated their military culture. That's why we've never lost a war since unification. We've never fought outside the known parameters of Galactic Federation combat doctrines, Serena pointed out. Every conflict has followed established protocols. Even our enemies understood the rules of engagement. Torres frowned. You're overthinking this, Captain. Unknown doesn't mean superior. It doesn't mean inferior either, she countered. It simply means we must be prepared for unconventional scenarios. Unconventional scenarios are what tactical simulations are for, Torres said with a dismissive wave. And I've never seen you score below perfect in those. Serena didn't reply. The tactical simulations were based on known variables, enemies who fought with recognizable patterns, who valued the same principles of combat that Orions did. What if these new beings operated on completely different principles? The thought both troubled and intrigued her. 2 days later, the Aurora I departed Centurion Station, the sleek vessel, with its distinctive arrowhead design and gleaming silver hull, carried Serena, Torres, and a hand-picked crew of 30 specialists, including Dr. Marin Solis, Orion's leading xenobiologist. As they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Ebon Rift system, Serena gathered her team in the briefing room. The holographic display showed a desolate planet, a rocky, forbidding world, with an atmosphere thick with toxic gases and electromagnetic disturbances. "This is where the signal originated," she explained, manipulating the display to highlight a region near the equator. "Sensors indicate artificial structures beneath the surface, extensive networks of tunnels and chambers." "Subterranean civilization?" Torres asked, frowning. "Not ideal terrain for Orion combat formations, which is precisely why we'll proceed with caution," Serena replied. "Our mission is contact and assessment, not engagement. We observe, we learn, we report back." Dr. Solis, a slight woman with keen eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw, stepped forward. "Captain, the atmospheric readings suggest highly adaptive biology would be required to survive here naturally. If these beings evolved on this planet, they could possess remarkable biological capabilities." Serena nodded. "Noted, Doctor. Prepare your analysis equipment accordingly." The landing party consisted of Serena, Torres, Dr. Solis, and 5 combat specialists in full environmental armor. They touched down a kilometer from the detected structures, deploying sensors to establish a secure perimeter before proceeding on foot. Ebon Rift lived up to its name. The landscape was a maze of jagged black rock formations, intersected by deep crevasses that seemed to lead nowhere. The sky above was a turbulent mass of greenish-gray clouds, occasionally split by electrical discharges that illuminated the terrain in stark, momentary flashes. "Movement detected," announced one of the specialists, his voice tight with tension. 300 meters ahead, multiple signatures, approaching rapidly. "Combat formation Delta," Torres ordered automatically, the team shifting into a defensive circle with practiced precision. "Belay that," Serena countermanded. "Diplomatic stance, weapons ready but not raised." Torres shot her a questioning look, but complied. The Orion military hierarchy was absolute. Once an order was given, it was followed without question, regardless of personal opinions. The first glimpse of the beings now known as Zanari came during a flash of lightning. For a moment, Serena thought she was seeing the rocky terrain itself move, then realized the creatures had skin that perfectly mimicked the black stone around them. They moved with a fluid grace that defied their apparent solidity, converging on the Orion team from multiple directions. "Remarkable adaptive camouflage," Dr. Solis whispered, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding protocol. As the Zanari drew closer, Serena could make out more details. They stood slightly shorter than the average human, with limbs that seemed capable of bending in multiple directions. Their faces, if they could be called that, were smooth, featureless expanses of the same stone-like material as their bodies, with only slight indentations where eyes might be expected. "I am Captain Serena Cade of the Orion Planetary Alliance," she announced, her translator unit broadcasting on all frequencies. "We come seeking peaceful contact." The Zanari stopped their advance, forming a loose semicircle around the Orion team. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, one of the creatures stepped forward. Its surface rippled, the stone-like texture becoming smoother, more reflective, almost metallic. "We perceive you," came a voice that seemed to emanate not from the creature itself, but from the air around them. "You are not of the rift. Your presence is disruptive." "We apologize for any disruption," Serena replied carefully. "We detected your signals and wished to establish communication." The Zanari's surface rippled again, patches of it becoming transparent, revealing glimpses of a complex internal structure, unlike any biology Serena had encountered in her studies. "Signals are for those who cannot feel. We feel each other. We feel the rift. We now feel you." Dr. Solis stepped forward slightly. "You communicate through some form of collective neural network?" she asked, her analytical mind already attempting to categorize what they were witnessing. "The concept you designate neural network is inadequate," the Zanari responded. "We are individual and collective simultaneously. We are Arvash of the changing biology, and this speaking unit has been formed to interact with your separation." Torres shifted uncomfortably beside Serena. "Captain, this is beyond standard first contact protocols," he murmured. "We should retreat to the ship and report to command." Before Serena could respond, the Zanari representative, Arvash, spoke again. "Your discomfort is perceived. You fear what you do not understand. This is a primitive response." Torres bristled visibly. "We fear nothing. Orion combat doctrine has overcome every challenge in 3 centuries of warfare." The surface of Arvash's body rippled in what might have been their version of amusement. "Combat, yes. We have observed your kind's approach to conflict throughout the galaxy. Ritualized, predictable, limiting. Our approach to combat is the result of centuries of refinement," Serena interjected diplomatically. "We value precision and honor in warfare." "Honor is irrelevant to survival," Arvash stated flatly. "Adaptation is everything." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, growing increasingly strained as cultural disconnects became apparent. The Zanari viewed Orion combat traditions as quaint curiosities at best, dangerously rigid thinking at worst. The Orions, with the exception of Serena and Dr. Solis, found the Zanari's fluid approach to everything from biology to social structure deeply unsettling. As they prepared to depart, Arvash made a final statement. "We will continue to observe your presence in this system. If you wish to learn, return. If you wish to impose, be warned. The rift adapts to all threats." Back aboard the Aurora Mai, Torres didn't bother hiding his disdain. "They speak in riddles and biological metaphors. Hardly a credible military threat." "I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss them," Serena cautioned. "Their biological technology appears highly advanced. Dr. Solis, your assessment." The xenobiologist looked up from her datapad, excitement evident in her eyes. "Captain, what we witnessed was extraordinary. The Zanari appear to have evolved, or engineered themselves, to adapt at the cellular level to any environment or threat. Their collective neural network allows for instantaneous sharing of these adaptations. In theory, if one Zanari learns how to counter a weapon or tactic, all of them immediately gain that knowledge." "That's concerning," Serena admitted. "It's irrelevant," Torres countered. "Adaptive or not, they still need to engage in physical combat, and no one outfights Orion." Over the next week, Serena led 3 more expeditions to Ebon Rift. Each contact with the Zanari revealed new aspects of their capabilities and worldview. They had no formal military structure, no standardized weapons, no tactical doctrines as Orions understood them. Instead, they operated as a fluid collective, individual units flowing together and apart as situations demanded, their very bodies transforming to create whatever tools or weapons they needed. During the 4th expedition, tensions escalated. A young Orion combat specialist, frustrated by what he perceived as Zanari arrogance, initiated an honor challenge. a ritualized combat demonstration meant to establish respect between potential adversaries. The Zanari representative, not Arvosh this time, but a similar being calling itself Lavora, observed the Orion's perfect fighting stance with what seemed like mild curiosity. "You wish to demonstrate combat proficiency?" Lavora asked. "I wish to show you the superiority of Orion combat techniques," the specialist replied confidently. "Proceed." What followed was both fascinating and disturbing. The Orion specialist executed a flawless series of strikes and maneuvers, a combat sequence that had been perfected over generations. Lavora simply stood motionless, its body absorbing each impact by becoming momentarily fluid, then solid again. After several minutes, the Orion paused, breathing heavily. "Fight back," he demanded. "Show your techniques." "We do not have techniques," Lavora replied. "We respond." And respond it did. Lavora's form suddenly shifted, elongating and flowing around the Orion specialist in a move impossible for any creature with a fixed skeletal structure. Before anyone could react, the specialist was completely encased in a cocoon of the Zanari's body, immobilized but unharmed. "Release him immediately!" Torres commanded, raising his weapon. Lavora flowed back into its previous form, leaving the specialist shaken but physically uninjured. "Your challenge has been answered," it stated simply. The incident created a diplomatic crisis. The Orion War Council, upon receiving Serena's report, viewed the Zanari response as both a humiliation and a potential threat. General Scalaris ordered an immediate show of force operation, a strategy frequently employed when dealing with newly contacted civilizations to establish Orion military dominance from the outset. "This is premature," Serena argued during an emergency council session. "We don't fully understand their capabilities or intentions. What we understand is that they've demonstrated hostile intent toward Orion personnel." Scalaris countered. "Protocol is clear, Captain. We establish dominance, then negotiate from a position of strength. These beings don't seem to recognize our concept of dominance," Serena persisted. "Their entire worldview is based on adaptation, not hierarchy. Then they will adapt to understanding their place relative to Orion," Scalaris declared, ending the discussion. The operation was planned with typical Orion precision. 3 combat vessels would deploy to Ebon Rift, target an uninhabited Zanari outpost, identified by the Aurora Wine scans, and conduct a controlled demonstration of Orion weapons capabilities. It was a tactic that had worked dozens of times throughout Orion's expansion, showing potential adversaries exactly what they would face if they chose conflict. Serena was ordered to observe, but not interfere. Standing on the bridge of the command vessel, she watched with growing unease as the Orion squadron approached the Zanari outpost, a cluster of structures that appeared to grow from the rocky surface of Ebon Rift, like organic crystals. "Commencing demonstration in 3, 2, 1, the tactical officer announced. The lead vessel fired a precisely calibrated energy burst at an unoccupied section of the outpost. It was meant to vaporize the target area with surgical precision, leaving surrounding structures untouched to demonstrate both power and control. Instead, the energy beam seemed to be absorbed by the crystalline structures, which glowed momentarily before redirecting the energy in multiple directions. Before the Orion vessels could react, they were hit by their own weaponry, refracted and amplified. "Shields down to 60%, shouted the tactical officer. "The energy signature has been modified. Our countermeasures aren't responding." "Evasive maneuvers," the commander ordered, his voice tight with shock. "Prepare secondary weapon systems." But the Zanari response had only begun. The surface of Ebon Rift itself seemed to come alive, the black rock formations shifting and flowing upward like liquid, forming massive tentacle-like structures that reached for the Orion vessels. "They've weaponized the planetary surface," Serena realized aloud. "It's all connected to their neural network." The Orion vessels attempted to retreat, but 2 were caught by the stone tentacles, which wrapped around their hulls and began to crush them with inexorable pressure. Emergency transport systems activated, beaming crews to the command vessel seconds before their ships imploded. The demonstration of force had turned into a humiliating defeat. Worse, the Zanari immediately launched a counterattack, not against the retreating Orion vessels, but directly toward Orion space. Hundreds of small, organic-looking craft emerged from Ebon Rift's surface, moving with impossible speed and changing their configuration as they traveled. They're adapting their ships to our defensive capabilities in real time, Serena observed as data streamed in. Each encounter with our technology teaches them how to counter it. Within days, the Zanari had bypassed Orion's outer defense perimeter and established a foothold in the Ceresian asteroid belt, just 2 systems away from Oris Prime itself. The War Council, stunned by the unprecedented military setback, convened an emergency session. "How could they move so quickly?" demanded Admiral Vex, pounding his fist on the council table. "Our intelligence suggested they had minimal space travel capabilities." "Our intelligence was based on assumptions," Serena replied, standing firm despite the hostile glares from around the table. "We assessed their capabilities according to our understanding of technology and warfare. The Zanari operate on entirely different principles. Principles or not, we must respond with overwhelming force," General Scalaris insisted. "I am activating the entire home fleet. We will crush this incursion and pursue them back to their homeworld if necessary." "General, with respect, that approach has already failed," Serena argued. "The Zanari don't fight according to any doctrine we recognize. They don't value the same strategic objectives. They don't even maintain consistent physical forms. We need to reconsider our entire approach." "Are you suggesting Orion combat doctrine is inadequate, Captain?" Scalaris asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm suggesting it's optimized for opponents who think like we do," Serena replied carefully. "The Zanari don't. They're a collective consciousness that values adaptation above all else. Every engagement teaches them more about how to defeat us. Then we shall teach them the price of challenging Orion until they adapt to fear," Scalaris declared, dismissing her concerns. The resulting battle in the Ceresian belt was a disaster for Orion forces. The home fleet, deploying in perfect formation according to centuries of refined doctrine, found itself facing an enemy that refused to engage according to any recognizable pattern. The Zanari craft seemed to merge and separate at will, their weapons constantly shifting to exploit weaknesses in Orion defenses. When Orion forces did manage to destroy a Zanari vessel, the debris itself seemed to remain active, attaching to Orion ships like parasites and corrupting their systems. Serena, assigned to a tactical analysis role rather than direct command due to her questionable loyalty to doctrine, watched the defeat unfold with a growing sense of dread. The Orion military, for all its precision and discipline, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that treated warfare not as an art form with rules and traditions, but as a simple problem of adaptation and survival. 3 days after the Ceresian defeat, the unthinkable happened. A Zanari strike force, composed of craft that had somehow adapted to mimic Orion identification signatures, penetrated the defenses of Oris Prime itself. They struck not at military targets, but at the central neural network hub that connected Orion's planetary defense systems. Within hours, the capital was under siege. Zanari forces, now taking forms that combined aspects of their own biology with adapted Orion technology, controlled key strategic points throughout the city. The War Council, for the first time in Orion history, was forced to retreat to an emergency bunker beneath the ancient fortress of Calamar. It was there, in the grim underground chamber, lit by emergency power cells, that Serena finally found an audience willing to listen. "We cannot defeat them through conventional warfare," she told the assembled leaders. Her voice, steady, despite the distant sounds of battle that penetrated even the thick walls of the bunker. Every engagement, win or lose, provides them with more data to adapt against us. We need a different approach entirely. "What would you suggest, Captain?" asked Admiral Vex. The belligerence gone from his voice, replaced by exhaustion and something Serena had never heard from an Orion military leader before: uncertainty. "We need to understand their fundamental weakness," Serena explained. "Dr. Solis and I have been analyzing all our encounters with the Zanari. Their strength is their collective neural network. It allows them to share adaptations instantly across their entire force. But it's also potentially their vulnerability." She activated a holographic display, showing complex neural patterns. "The Zanari aren't just communicating through this network, they're thinking through it. It's a shared consciousness. If we could disrupt it somehow." "Disrupt how?" Scalaris asked, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by grudging attention. "Our communications jamming had no effect." "Because we were targeting the wrong frequencies," Dr. Solis interjected, stepping forward. "We've been trying to jam what we thought were communication signals, but the Zanari neural network operates on principles more similar to biological synapses than electronic transmissions. I believe I can develop a device that would create interference specifically targeted at their neural frequency." "What would this accomplish?" Vex questioned. "It would temporarily individualize them," Serena explained. "Cut off from the collective, each Zanari would retain its current adaptations, but lose the ability to gain new ones or coordinate with a larger force. They'd be like soldiers who suddenly can't hear orders or see the overall battle plan." Scalaris stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Even if this works, it would only give us a temporary advantage. How do we use that to achieve victory?" "That depends on how we define victory," Serena replied carefully. "If our goal is annihilation of the Zanari, I don't believe that's achievable, even individualized. They remain formidable adaptive opponents. But if our goal is ending this conflict and securing Orion—" "Speak plainly, Captain," Scalaris demanded. "I believe we should use the disruption to force a stalemate, then negotiate. The Zanari attacked because they perceived our demonstration as a threat to their existence. They're fighting to survive, not to conquer." The council chambers erupted in argument. The concept of negotiating from anything other than a position of total dominance was antithetical to Orion military philosophy. Yet, as the debate raged, the reality of their situation became increasingly clear. They were facing the first defeat in Orion military history. Finally, General Scalaris raised his hand for silence. "Captain Cade, you and Dr. Solis have 24 hours to develop this neural disruptor. If it proves effective, we will reconsider our approach to this conflict." Over the next day, Serena worked alongside Dr. Solis and a team of Orion's top scientists to create the neural disruptor. They repurposed components from standard communication arrays, medical scanning equipment, and even entertainment systems, creating a device unlike anything in Orion's military arsenal. "Will it work?" Serena asked, as they prepared for the first field test. Dr. Solis's tired face showed both determination and doubt. "In theory, yes. But we're dealing with a neural structure unlike anything we've encountered before. The effect could be minimal. Or we could cause them pain beyond imagining," Solis admitted quietly. "Severing a collective consciousness could be like cutting off parts of their own minds." Serena absorbed this sobering possibility. "We need to test it in a controlled environment first. If the effects are too severe, we'll need to recalibrate." The opportunity for testing came sooner than expected. A small group of Zanari infiltrators was detected approaching the bunker complex. Rather than destroying them immediately, Serena convinced Scalaris to allow a capture operation using the prototype disruptor. The device, when activated, had an immediate and dramatic effect. The three Zanari infiltrators, who had been moving with their characteristic fluid grace, suddenly stopped and separated from each other. Their forms, which had been perfectly adapted to the bunker's environment, began to shift erratically, as if they were trying to adapt to too many stimuli at once. "They're disoriented," Serena observed, "but still conscious and apparently not in extreme pain." "The effect is holding," Dr. Solis confirmed, monitoring the device. "Their neural patterns are individualized, no sign of collective communication." Serena approached one of the disoriented Zanari cautiously. "Can you understand me?" she asked. The creature's surface rippled uncertainly, then stabilized into a form reminiscent of Arvash, though less defined. "I perceive individually," it responded, the voice weaker and more confused than in previous encounters. "The collective is silent. This is unfamiliar. We've temporarily disrupted your neural network," Serena explained. "It's not permanent, but it demonstrates our capability. We wish to negotiate an end to this conflict." The Zanari seemed to consider this, its surface shifting through various patterns before settling. "Without the collective, I cannot speak for all, but I can. Listen." That first conversation led to others. As the neural disruptor technology was refined and deployed more widely, the Zanari assault on Horus Prime faltered. Individual Zanari units, cut off from the collective intelligence that had guided their adaptive strategies, reverted to more basic tactics that Orion forces could effectively counter. Yet Serena, now given emergency authority by a desperate war council, did not push for total victory. Instead, she established communication with Arvash, who had emerged as a focal point for the fragmented Zanari forces. "Your weapon causes isolation," Arvash explained during their first direct meeting in the neutral zone established between the front lines. "For beings who have always existed as both individual and collective. This is disturbing, not painful in the physical sense you would understand, but existentially distressing." "I understand," Serena replied, though she knew she couldn't truly comprehend the experience. "We developed this technology to defend ourselves, not to cause suffering. We are prepared to deactivate the disruptors if the Zanari agree to withdraw from Orion space." "Withdrawal is possible," Arvash acknowledged. "But the underlying conflict remains. Your people demonstrated hostile intent at our outpost. The collective responded to an existential threat." "A misunderstanding," Serena explained. "Our demonstration was meant to establish respect, not to threaten your existence. Orion tradition holds that strength must be acknowledged before meaningful dialogue can occur. An inefficient tradition when encountering truly different beings," Arvash observed, its surface rippling in what Serena had come to recognize as their equivalent of dry humor. "Perhaps both our peoples have adaptations to make." The peace negotiations lasted weeks, complicated by resistance from hardliners on both sides. Many Orion military leaders, including General Scalaris initially, viewed anything short of complete victory as unacceptable. Similarly, portions of the Zanari collective, once neural communication was cautiously restored in limited form, advocated for continuing the conflict until Orion was no longer a threat. Yet, gradually, understanding grew. The Zanari came to recognize that Orion's rigid combat doctrines were not signs of limited intelligence, but expressions of deeply held cultural values: precision, discipline, tradition. The Orions, for their part, began to appreciate that the Zanari's fluid approach to warfare was not dishonorable, but simply a different evolutionary path, one that prized adaptation and collective intelligence over individual prowess. 6 months after the siege of Horus Prime, a formal peace treaty was signed. The Zanari withdrew from Orion space, and the Orions deactivated the neural disruptors. More significantly, a joint research facility was established on Ebon Rift, where specialists from both civilizations would study each other's approaches to technology, biology, and yes, warfare. Serena, now promoted to the newly created position of military diplomatic ambassador, stood alongside Arvash at the dedication ceremony for the research center. The facility, built into the black rock of Ebon Rift, incorporated elements of both cultures. The precise geometric architecture of Orion, alongside the organic, flowing structures of Zenari design. An adaptation more significant than any biological change, Arvash commented as they surveyed the finished complex. Two fundamentally different ways of existence, finding connection. The greatest adaptation is in thinking, Serena replied. Both our peoples believed we understood warfare until we fought each other, and discovered that understanding itself requires flexibility. Arvash finished. The collective has gained much from this encounter, perspectives we could not have evolved in isolation. As have we, Serena acknowledged. General Scalaris has authorized a complete revision of Orion combat doctrine, the first in 3 centuries. We're calling it Adaptive Engagement Protocol. Arvash's surface shimmered in what she now recognized as amusement. A very Orion name for learning to think like Zenari. Not entirely like Zenari, Serena corrected with a smile. But perhaps with appreciation for your approach, the best of both worlds. As they stood there, watching Orion and Zenari researchers working side by side, Serena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From first contact to warfare to understanding, it had been a painful evolution, yet a necessary one. Orion military excellence had been built on perfecting a single approach to combat. Now, they were learning that true mastery came not from perfection within limitations, but from transcending those limitations entirely. The war with the Zenari had nearly destroyed Orion. Yet in surviving it, in adapting, they had become stronger than they had ever been. Not through superior firepower or more precise tactics, but through the most powerful adaptation of all, the ability to change their thinking. As the twin suns of Ebon Rift set behind the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the research facility, Serena found herself looking forward to the future with a sense of possibility that no Orion military officer had experienced in generations. They had thought they understood combat until they started a war with foreigners. Now, they understood that understanding itself was an ongoing process, never complete, always evolving. And in that understanding, perhaps, lay the true path to peace. In the years that followed, the alliance between Orion and Zenari transformed both societies. The research facility on Ebon Rift became the center for a new approach to interspecies relations throughout the Galactic Federation. Representatives from dozens of civilizations came to study what became known as the Ebon Accord, a framework for finding strength through diversity rather than conformity. Orion military forces, once renowned solely for their rigid precision, developed new doctrines incorporating adaptive principles learned from the Zenari. Combat units were trained not merely to execute perfect maneuvers, but to improvise and evolve their tactics in real time. The integration was not without resistance. Many veteran officers resigned, rather than abandon traditions they had spent lifetimes mastering. But the younger generation embraced the changes with enthusiasm. Serena, now serving as Orion's senior representative to the Galactic Federation, found herself frequently called upon to mediate conflicts between disparate species. Her experience bridging the fundamental gap between Orion and Zenari thinking had given her unique insight into cross-cultural communication. The key is recognizing that different is not inferior, she explained during a Federation symposium on conflict resolution. When we encounter beings who approach problems differently than we do, our first instinct is often to judge them by our standards. But true understanding requires temporarily setting aside those standards and attempting to see through their perspective. General Scalaris, who had eventually become one of the strongest advocates for the new approach, sat in the audience. His once rigid posture had softened somewhat over the years, though he still wore his medals with pride. "Captain, forgive me. Ambassador Cade speaks truth that came at great cost," he added when it was his turn to address the gathering. "Orion believed we had perfected warfare. We were wrong. What we had perfected was a single approach to warfare, effective only against those who accepted our basic premises. The Zanari taught us that true mastery comes not from perfection within a system, but from the ability to transcend systems entirely. The Zanari, for their part, had also evolved. Their collective neural network had always valued adaptation, but contact with individual-focused species, like the Orions, had introduced new concepts. They began experimenting with more persistent individuality, allowing specialized units like Arvash to maintain consistent forms and personalities for extended periods, while still remaining connected to the collective. This led to an unexpected development. A small subset of Zanari, fascinated by Orion culture, requested permission to undergo a more permanent individuation process. They wished to experience existence as separate beings, while maintaining a limited connection to the collective, similar to how Orions maintained their individual identities while functioning as part of military units. The experiment was controversial among both species. Many Zanari viewed such persistent individuality as an unnecessary limitation. Many Orions were uncomfortable with the idea of Zanari adopting aspects of their culture. Yet the individuated, as they came to be called, proved to be invaluable bridges between the two civilizations, able to fully understand both perspectives. One such individuated was Lavora, who had been among the first Zanari to engage in direct combat with Orion forces, now serving as a tactical advisor to the Joint Defense Initiative. Lavora had adopted a stable form that incorporated elements of both species. The metallic sheen of Orion ceremonial armor merged seamlessly with the adaptive fluidity of Zanari biology. The greatest strength of Orion combat was never its precision. Lavora observed during a training session with mixed Orion Zanari units. It was the commitment to continuous improvement. You refined your techniques through countless iterations, always seeking the perfect form. We can apply that same dedication to refinement while expanding the range of what is refined. The training exercises that followed demonstrated this philosophy in action. Orion combat specialists, renowned for their perfect execution of standardized techniques, now learn to incorporate Zanari adaptive principles. Rather than viewing their bodies as instruments to be honed for specific movements, they began to see them as tools capable of evolving new approaches to each situation. Conversely, the Zanari participants, accustomed to relying on continuous physical adaptation, studied Orion discipline focus. They learned to maintain consistent forms for longer periods, channeling their adaptive energy into refined techniques rather than constant change. Dr. Solis, whose pioneering work on the neural disruptor had evolved into a comprehensive study of Zanari biology, observed these training sessions with scientific fascination and personal satisfaction. "What we're witnessing is a new kind of evolution," she told Serena, as they watched an Orion combat specialist performing a traditional kata alongside a Zanari, mimicking the movements with perfect precision. Not just biological or technological, but cultural. Both species are selectively adopting traits from each other while maintaining their core identities. "Is that why you've incorporated some Zanari adaptive technology into your research equipment?" Serena asked, with a knowing smile, nodding toward the doctor's scanner, which now featured flowing, organic components alongside traditional Orion precision instruments. Dr. Solis looked momentarily embarrassed, then laughed. "Guilty as charged. Once you start seeing the possibilities of integration, it's hard to go back to single-system thinking. The combined approach yields results neither system could achieve alone." This principle extended beyond military applications. Orion architecture, once characterized by rigid geometric precision, began incorporating adaptive elements inspired by Zanari designs. Buildings could now reconfigure internal spaces based on usage patterns, environmental conditions, or occupant preferences. Zanari habitats, traditionally in constant flux, adopted aspects of Orion stability where appropriate, creating spaces that balanced adaptation with consistency. Perhaps most significantly, the Orion education system underwent a fundamental transformation. Where once young Orions were taught to perfect established techniques through repetition and discipline, they now learn to balance mastery of fundamentals with creative adaptation. Combat training included not just execution of standard forms, but improvisation exercises, where trainees had to respond to unpredictable scenarios. "We are not abandoning our traditions," Serena explained to a group of concerned veteran officers during a particularly contentious reform debate. "We're ensuring they remain relevant. The perfect execution of obsolete techniques is still obsolete. Our ancestors didn't create our combat doctrines as static monuments. They developed them as living systems to ensure victory. We honor their intent, if not their specific methods, by continuing to evolve." Not everyone embraced these changes. A faction of traditionalists, led by retired Admiral Vex, argued vehemently that Orion was losing its cultural identity. They established separate training facilities where the old ways were preserved in their purest form, attracting a small but dedicated following of those who valued tradition above innovation. Similarly, some portions of the Zanari collective resisted increased contact with Orion and other individual-focused species, retreating deeper into the tunnels of ebb and rift to maintain their traditional fluid existence without external influence. Yet, for the majority on both sides, the integration continued, driven by pragmatic recognition of its benefits. When a major crisis emerged 3 years after the Ebon Accord, a highly aggressive species from beyond Federation space, launching simultaneous attacks on multiple worlds, the combined Orion-Zanari response proved devastatingly effective. Orion precision strikes, enhanced by Zanari adaptive technology, systematically dismantled the invaders' command structure. Meanwhile, Zanari infiltration units, now capable of maintaining consistent forms for extended operations, penetrated enemy installations and gathered critical intelligence with a discipline that matched their natural adaptability. The conflict was resolved in weeks, rather than the months or years it might have taken either civilization alone. More importantly, it was resolved with minimal casualties on all sides, the integrated approach prioritizing strategic precision over brute force. In the aftermath, as Serena participated in peace negotiations with the defeated aggressors, she found herself reflecting on how far both Orion and Zanari had come since their own conflict. Seated across from alien beings whose appearance and thought processes were even more foreign than the Zanari had been, she no longer felt the instinctive urge to judge them by Orion standards. "We seek to understand your motivations," she told the alien delegation, "not to impose our values upon you. Different perspectives need not lead to conflict if we can find common ground." Arvash, now serving as the Zanari representative to the Federation Council, added its perspective. "Adaptation need not mean erasing differences. It can mean creating new connections while maintaining distinct identities." Later, as they left the negotiation chamber, Arvash's surface rippled with what Serena had come to recognize as thoughtful contemplation. "When we first encountered Orion, the collective believed your rigid thinking would lead to your extinction. Now we understand that rigidity and fluidity are not opposites, but complementary forces. The strength of a structure comes from both its solid framework and its flexible components." A lesson both our peoples needed to learn, Serena acknowledged, and one the Federation as a whole is still struggling with. So many species, so many different approaches to existence. Finding harmony without homogeneity is the great challenge of our time. A challenge worthy of both Orion discipline and Zanari adaptation, Arvash replied. Perhaps that is why our conflict occurred, to prepare us for this larger purpose. Serena wasn't sure she believed in such cosmic orchestration, but she had to admit the symmetry was compelling. Two civilizations with diametrically opposed approaches to warfare had nearly destroyed each other, only to discover that their true strength lay in integration rather than opposition. As they walked through the grand hall of the Federation Council building, representatives of dozens of species nodded respectfully to them. The Orion-Zanari alliance had become a model for interspecies cooperation throughout the galaxy, proof that fundamental differences could be bridges rather than barriers. On a personal level, Serena found her own thinking had evolved in ways she could never have anticipated. The young intelligence officer, who had once evaluated everything according to rigid Orion standards, now saw possibilities where before she had seen only protocols. The discipline remained. Her reports were still models of precision, her diplomatic initiatives meticulously planned. But now that precision served flexibility rather than constraining it. Major Torres, who had been the most skeptical of the Zanari during first contact, had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation. After extensive study of Zanari collective neural structures, he had volunteered for an experimental neural implant that allowed limited connection to their network. While remaining fully Orion in biology and primary consciousness, he could now experience aspects of collective awareness, a perspective that had profoundly changed his understanding of both warfare and existence itself. "It's not about losing yourself," he explained to Serena during one of their infrequent reunions. "It's about expanding yourself. I'm still Torres, but I'm Torres with access to perspectives I could never have imagined before. It's like living your whole life, seeing only one spectrum of light, then suddenly gaining the ability to see infrared and ultraviolet simultaneously." This kind of deep integration remained rare. Most Orions weren't prepared for such a fundamental shift in consciousness, but even small steps toward mutual understanding had transformed both societies. Zanari adaptive technology enhanced Orion precision weapons. Orion disciplined focus strengthened Zanari collective decision-making. The research facility on Ebon Rift had expanded into a sprawling complex where specialists from both civilizations worked side by side on projects ranging from military applications to artistic collaborations. Perhaps most remarkably, a new generation was growing up within this integrated environment. Young Orions, who had never known a time before Zanari contact, and newly formed Zanari, who had always experienced some degree of Orion influence. "They don't see the contradictions we struggled with," Dr. Solis observed, as she watched a group of Orion children playing alongside small Zanari forms in an adaptive playground that reconfigured itself based on their interactions. To them, the combination of structure and fluidity is natural, the way things have always been. Serena nodded, watching as an Orion child executed a perfect series of movements from traditional combat training, only to dissolve into laughter and improvisational play immediately afterward. They're learning both precision and adaptation from the beginning. Imagine what they'll accomplish when they come of age. They already embody the lesson it took our generation a war to learn, Dr. Solis replied. That true strength comes not from perfecting a single approach, but from integrating diverse perspectives. As she prepared to return to her diplomatic duties, Serena took one final look at the children, the future of both civilizations. The Orion military had once prided itself on understanding combat in its most perfect form. The Zanari collective had evolved to adapt to any conflict situation. Both had been right, and both had been limited by their certainty. The new generation would carry forward a different lesson. That understanding itself was never complete. That adaptation was not abandonment of identity, but enhancement of it, and that the greatest strength came not from knowing all the answers, but from remaining open to new questions. They had thought they understood combat, until they started a war with foreigners. Now they understood that understanding itself was an endless journey. One best traveled together.